Epsilassi, welcome to another edition of Mawio'mi. I'm your host, Jim Richardson.
And I'm your co-host, Terry Richardson.
Bro, we have an interesting conversation today.
Yes, we're very fortunate to have with us today somebody who brings a wealth of knowledge in the energy sector, something that's very important for the province of New Brunswick as we move forward. And actually a person who worked with NB Power for many years, Claire Harris. Thank you so much for joining us, Claire.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Claire,
having me.
give us an overview of your background. I mean, what got you interested in that field of energy?
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having me on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So I really appreciate being here today. I started in energy back in 1987, so a really long time ago. I enrolled in the Power Engineering Technology program at New Brunswick Community College, and I graduated in 1989 and started to work at NB Power. And my very first job was at the Belledune Generating Station as an operations liaison person between operations and design. So my first job was at Belledune Generating Station, and then I continued on to work with NB Power for about 35 years.
Wow.
Yes. And then I decided to put my entrepreneurial spirit to work, and I started my own company called Clean Energy Connections. And so I'm kind of embarking on a new journey, and it's all about clean energy from the inside, and clean energy as it relates to our grid.
And you know, Claire, I think that's why we're so excited, because we've got to know you over the years with our involvement with small modular nuclear reactors in that particular field where you were working for a while before you left NB Power, and to now where you've brought proponents forward for us that we've been dealing with in the region. And it's exciting, and it's an exciting time in the province of New Brunswick right now with energy, bro, because
Absolutely.
You know, when you look, the need is there, and how are we going to meet this need as we move forward? And there's going to be a need for all kinds of energy, renewables, nothing's off the table. Hydrogen's still there. Small modular nuclear reactors are exciting. There's that technology seems to be more openness now to that technology. Don't you agree, Claire?
I do, yes. And I was excited about small modular reactors. I am still very excited about small modular reactors, and I work quite a bit with Saskatchewan and getting them ready for a nuclear program. But I always thought, wouldn't it be great to start my career at Belledune and with coal, and end my career at Belledune with a small modular reactor. So
that would be awesome.
Claire, you raised an interesting point for our viewers out there who'd be interested in what is the difference between clean energy and green energy?
Well, from my perspective, green energy is typically, seen as the hydro, renewables, wind and solar, and perhaps green hydrogen. But when we think about clean energy, that includes nuclear energy. And nuclear doesn't try to, brand itself as green. We know that from a whole life cycle point of view, and when we get into the waste issue, it would maybe be, it would throw people off to call it green. So we call it clean energy, and it's very clean. And I have to say, I'm a big fan of nuclear waste. I think I know it's well regulated and controlled, and we always know where everything is. And so it's actually, from my perspective, the cleanest energy that we can go with.
And and when you talk about nuclear, I think it's demystifying that nuclear explosion. And oh my God, there's going to be, because there's a lot of benefits with nuclear as well. I mean, the radiation, the medical aspect, the medical isotope aspect that a lot of people don't realize is there. Yeah. And people have to realize, that's part of what nuclear provides us. And I agree. I think there's becoming more of an openness now out there for people to understand, if we're going to meet our energy needs moving forward, nuclear has to be part of that solution, because we just don't have enough renewables. And renewables, again, I go back to that old cliche, what do you do when the wind don't blow, the sun don't shine, and the water don't flow?
Right.
Your renewables aren't working, right?
Yeah.
So that's why, nuclear is almost part of the solution. Until hydrogen, hydrogen is many years out, I believe.
Yeah, and it's not going to be that, that I don't believe that hydrogen's going to provide that base load energy. Yeah. And when you think about energy density for the amount of land space that's used and the amount of energy that you get from nuclear power, it really is a winner all the way around. And I always like that statement that was made, that there is no net zero without nuclear energy, and there is no nuclear energy without Indigenous partnerships, because it will always go through an Indigenous territory.
I guess from an elder's perspective, I look at the issue as being, preserving Mother Earth, eliminating carbon capture. But there's a bit of a dichotomy there because you're creating a scar on Mother Earth with that nuclear waste. You're putting it down into the bowels of Mother Earth. What do you have to say about that?
Well, that's a big one.
It is. I didn't mean to ambush you on that one.
No.
But it is, from an elder's
agree.
perspective, a concern.
I do. I do agree that I believe it's the best, solution for a difficult, situation that we're in. I'm reading a book right now. I just cracked it open and started reading through it. It's called Abundance. And it's all about the fact that if we could imagine where we are today with a lot of scars on Mother Earth, and if we could imagine the future of energy being clean and green and reducing our impact and our scars on Mother Earth by actually, re-greening a lot of spaces that perhaps we would have, damaged through coal generation and through other forms of energy. So how do we actually minimize to the best degree the amount of scarring that occurs with Mother Earth? I believe that the approach that the Nuclear Waste Management Organization has taken from a definite free, prior, and informed consent point of view, that they are trying to minimize as much as possible the impact on Mother Earth while maintaining a clean energy supply and having a very robust solution for nuclear waste.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question, and it's a good point, because how do we, mitigate? But I believe, technology is forever evolving. Mm-hmm. And I believe there's going to be a point where nuclear waste will be utilized in part of the nuclear solution. And what I mean by that is you've got reactor development out there, and companies like Moltex as an example, and I'm sure in the future there'll be even more, where they're looking at using that nuclear waste to its full potential. Because as we know now, there's like an 80% of a fuel rod is used, 20% is waste. Now it's going to be, where if you could reduce that down to even less of an amount of nuclear waste, mm-hmm. You're looking, instead of 1,000-year life cycle of the waste, you're looking at 100 years before it becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, well said to both points. I think it's all about balance, and looking at the future. It's not what is what can be down the road. And you don't hold back. We need to eliminate, some of the carbon that's going out there, and we see it, the animals, the plants, everybody's talking to. You just have to stop and listen to realize that Mother Earth is hurting.
Absolutely.
And, so we have to focus a bit on moving forward. Plus, from an economic perspective, we in New Brunswick have great potential. Don't you agree, Claire?
We do have great potential, and I would like to see us embrace innovation, and truly continue to look for those opportunities for New Brunswick and for Canada when it comes to nuclear innovation. And I believe that in many years' time, perhaps the innovation will be ready to help us maybe reduce the amount of nuclear waste, but I do believe we'll always need the deep geological repository. But I do believe that it's done in a very respectful way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from an energy perspective, we're looking into the future of energy. Many of our assets in New Brunswick are nearing the end of their life. Some of them were built, before I started working there, so they're getting pretty old. And so, I think that we need to make sure that as we look to, some of the assets being retired, that we're looking for those innovative solutions.
Bro, I don't want to get Claire involved in the NB Power discussion, but you and I know, the challenges with NB Power right now, the restructuring. But, I look at it and saying, well, we're not the only people the only province that has issue with their power corporation. We've got a $5 billion debt. Well, Manitoba has a $20 billion debt. So you put it in proportion.
And is it really a debt? It belongs to the province. It's a crown corporation. So really it's a debt that's carried. Can it be classified as it, or is it an expense of the province?
Or do you bring it on to the taxpayers? It's on the ratepayers right now.
And do you bring it on to the taxpayers? So this is a challenge, but I think that restructuring aspect, from my perspective, is important, because we have to have a vision moving forward as we keep going. You can't, I find Premier Holt said it very well. We can't keep kicking the can further down the road. At some point, somebody has to take a stand and say, okay, we have to make some change. Whether it's selling off some of those assets, that are old and that we just can't, as a utility, they can't afford to do the upgrades, or do we look at another venue? And I think that's important. And a lot of people, I sympathize sometimes with the people in NB Power, because it's a hard job.
It is.
It's you're a crown corporation.
Yeah.
So you can say all you want. It's not really it's a business, yes, but it's also involved in government. So there's politics.
Well, it involves in government in terms of the rates. I mean,
it's a political thing, right?
People don't like to pay high rates. But I say kudos to the NB government and their approach towards looking at the restructuring. The consultation process with people. Let's all get involved and look at the direction we should go with respect to NB Power. Claire, I think if you look at energy down the road, I mean, different types of power come in, but we're still going to rely a lot on our traditional power as well, non-utility generations, for example, the dams, that sort of stuff. Right. And the impact that has is another factor. But still, there's, traditional sources that are still going to be, except for coal. I think we're getting rid of that.
I hope so. I hope we're still getting rid of coal. But they're changing some policies down, south of the border. So hopefully that doesn't migrate up here. But I think as we look to the future of clean energy, the innovations are there, the technology's there, and we need to collaborate more. I think provinces need to get together more. I really like seeing that, breaking down the trade barriers between Ontario and New Brunswick. Yeah. I think it's really going to help, the provinces of New Brunswick and the territories collaborate. Say, okay, what does Nova Scotia need, and how can New Brunswick support that, and what does Prince Edward Island need, and how can we all support each other, and really look at energy as a need for all of us, and who has the solutions, that east-west grid instead of the north-south grid.
The other thing that Terry mentions quite frequently, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, bro, but he talks about an Atlantic.
Yes.
You can say it better than I can.
No, an Atlantic group that you would have, Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, working together and becoming an energy giant in Canada for the Atlantic region. I think that's the key to moving forward, instead of going off and doing your own things. And we recently signed an agreement with Nova Scotia Power, NB Power, the First Nation of Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia, and the First Nation Mi'kmaq of New Brunswick, in regards to transmission line going east to west instead of north to south. Exactly. And this is these are the times we're in right now. It's scary times, because we've got a neighbor now down south who ain't so neighborly anymore.
Right.
And they're showing us some pretty hard lines, and it's opened our eyes up, I think, as Canadians, to say, okay, wait a minute, we've got to be working together here,
exactly.
not divided. And I think there's an openness now for projects, and the time is going to be. I mean, right now we're in a federal election, but after the election, the time is going to be right for, regardless of what party gets in, to start moving and making decisions and ensuring the security of Canada and the markets for Canada.
Yeah.
And, exactly. And really, I know that Atlantica Centre for Energy has looked at the idea of maybe a regional integrated resource plan when it comes to energy planning. And so I do hope that as we start to work east to west, that we'll start to look more at what do we need for the region.
Yeah.
And so a nuclear plant, perhaps in New Brunswick, could supply energy also to Nova Scotia to help them get off coal.
Exactly.
Because they have a lot more to overcome than we do.
Definitely.
We've got one coal plant to shut down.
Well, keep that train of thought. We're going to go for a quick break, and we'll come back and carry on the conversation.
Okay,
we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the next segment, and we're here. We're very fortunate to have with us Claire Harris talking to us about energy, bro.
Yeah,
and,
for sure. It's been a good conversation.
One of the things we wanted to talk about was what was that again?
Prodigy?
No, not yet.
Talk about black
the work
pellets?
we did with
Smart Grid.
Yes.
We wanted to talk about the work that's been done with Smart Grid and engaging people in the province to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, so we were asked to support Smart Grid Innovation Network, University of New Brunswick, and and it was funded by Research New Brunswick, and we spent some time, and also North Shore Mi'kmaq Tribal Council was involved, and we spent some time out around the province talking to people, and we had the great fortune of talking to many Indigenous people as well. But we talked to about 450 people, and we asked them, kind of what's getting in the way of energy development. And the four main themes that we were focusing on were trust and confidence. Having trust in our own ability and confidence that we can actually move files forward. That was one of the things that we talked about. The other one was around communication and collaborating with each other and working together. The third one was around workforce development, and then the fourth one was around how energy is connected to economic development.
That's a good one, Claire, economic development. And the communication, just before I get on that one, the communication side is very important as well.
Yes.
And I think that's the way, having people informed in what's going on in the energy sector and what's happening, and demystifying, again, I go back, demystifying nuclear and letting people know what's going on. So that to that extent, when you talk about the, economics, when we look at what's happening up north, and I looked at that as an opportunity, and you see what's happening with climate change, the winter roads not being able to be traveled anymore, the necessity to fly fuel in. All our communities up north, First Nation communities, are burn diesel to keep operating, which is a huge cost. You're looking at, I think that they said $1 a kilowatt was what the costs are.
It's extremely expensive.
It's very expensive. So, when you look at some of the new technology that's coming out, and one of the ones that we, that's really excited me, and I see it as an opportunity for New Brunswick, is Prodigy. A couple of university students out of MIT down in the States. We won't hold that against them, but they're very, very knowledgeable. They're registering here in New Brunswick as a business. I think that kind of technology, where it's a platform, where it's what's the word I'm using?
Transportable nuclear power.
But not only that, but it's not dependent on any specific reactor.
Right, it's agnostic. It's technology agnostic.
Technology agnostic. And that's what I love about it, is because any reactor can go on this platform.
Absolutely.
And that platform can be brought up north. And when you're looking at it, you're not looking at it could be up to a 100 megawatt reactor, but it could be even less, like a 50 or a 40, depending on what's needed. And when we look at what's happening in the north right now with the development and the need for critical minerals, and Canada's ready to develop, it sort of ties in, where there's an opportunity where First Nation communities can get involved, in the sense that they bring this technology in, they become the seller of the power to the mining sector. And then, when the mine's up and gone, the reactor's still there providing power for the community. So
that's
it's
a
very
great
exciting.
point, and internationally as well. You look at many mining companies, for example, Canadian mining companies that are in remote areas where they're dependent on diesel. The cost of that is really big. One of the points you were talking about with respect to the smart grid, the 4 points that you raise are very interesting, because that's almost a prelude to the whole study and the consultation that the NB Power restructuring process that the government wants is taking place on right now.
And people want transparency. People just want to know, what is happening and what are the decisions that are being made, right? And so, back to Prodigy, I know my son worked up north in a northern community near James Bay, and they were off-grid, and they had to depend on diesel. So they couldn't have the community centers open in the evening. They didn't have activities for the kids because they couldn't afford to run the community centers at night. They didn't have greenhouses because they didn't have the energy to run a greenhouse. So you can imagine, if we could provide some energy sovereignty to a remote community, they could support their mind, but they can also support their way of life, and they can also support their
some
food
people
supply.
talk about it in the context, critically say, well, why don't they just put a grid in there? Well, you know what the cost of, putting that in some of these remote communities and linking them together, just unbelievable.
$30-40 billion,
which
is crazy.
Easily.
It's not possible, right?
You're going back to your baby, which is your start with NB Power.
Yes.
And the power station at the Port of Beldoon. Interesting things happening there now.
Yes, biomass.
Claire.
The biomass project. I think it's a really innovative and interesting project. And so as much as I thought, Beldoon was going to be coal to nuclear, I think they're going to be coal to biomass, and maybe a small modular reactor nearby. But the biomass project is really innovative and interesting. And I know that the the engineers that are working on that are very excited about the prospect of that, and they're
Yeah,
going
it
to
is.
show the way for many others on that technology.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is with we had, you know, in that you have those subsidies with the European subsidies that are coming to an end in 2028 for white pellets.
Yeah.
Right.
There's an opportunity now to go to the black pellet.
Yes.
And so when you look at these companies,
Yeah.
you know, it's a great opportunity for Irving, for Shaw, for you know, a lot of these other companies that are exporting right now.
Yeah.
To make that transition over to that black pellet,
Exactly.
where it's going to solve, you know, the European market problem.
Good point, bro. You know, it's not just about, you know, converting from, you know, coal to black pellets. It's also exporting. We're involved with the
Economic
company,
development,
bro,
right.
as you know, with
Yeah.
Eric's. They're also looking at exporting,
Right.
Not just, you know, supplying the power plant, the black pellets. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting things happening in that whole field.
Right, and that's where we saw that play between energy and economic development.
Yeah.
They suit each other, right? Without
Absolutely.
energy, it's difficult to have economic development. You know, manufacturing companies need energy, so you know, a company like Positive Materials, they're going to need energy.
Yeah.
So new companies coming to the region will need energy, but also energy is an economic driver in and of itself.
Definitely.
The actual prodigy, if it was, you know, demonstrated here or piloted here, then that's economic driver. That's an economic driver for New Brunswick to take to the northern part of Canada. So,
Or even just the supply chain aspect.
absolutely.
You know, and I think that's where we've got to, you hit it right on the nail on the head earlier when you said innovation.
Yeah.
You know, we've got to get our heads out of the sand in New Brunswick and start thinking more forward thinking.
Yeah.
Not get caught up in
Yeah.
the old, okay, oil and natural gas, and that's the way we got to go. There's a play for that. Don't get me wrong. There's a
Yeah.
place for that. And there always will be, I think.
Yeah.
But transitioning out of that, we need to be forward thinking and looking at the future.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do that in New Brunswick for some reason.
And
I
pulling
think-
out
I think
all
there's
those
a-
tools, right?
I think there's a start, though. I mean, people are starting to think now more about clean energy and green energy,
Exactly.
so I think the combination of the two is the future. You know,
Exactly.
if we're looking at right now, if we wanted to really prosper from an economic development perspective, what's our biggest impediment? Power.
Yes, exactly.
We
you
don't have
know?
sufficient power
We don't
right
have
now.
it, yeah. And I don't want to diss oil and natural gas because my son works at the refinery, so I'd be in trouble. But also, but also, you know, I mean, the natural gas that we use in the province of New Brunswick, you know, we buy it from the States. So, you know, I just think that there's so much opportunity right here in our home province and all across Canada, especially once we start working together and we're you know, collaborating more across Canada. There's just great opportunity for us.
Well, you travel a lot as well in your role, right? I mean,
do.
what are you seeing out there? Not only provincially, federally, and even internationally, because I think you've probably been involved to some extent in that. What are you seeing out there in terms of the interest?
Oh, interest is high. You know,
Yeah.
I was at, you were at CNA maybe last year. The Canadian Nuclear Association conference started maybe 6 years ago well, it didn't start 6 years ago, but when I was there 6 years ago, you know, there was probably 500 people. And I just came back last week from CNA and there was 1,750 people with probably a 200-person wait list. And so that area, the nuclear space is growing, and that's growing across, you know, all over the world. And so that space is a really interesting place to be. I am working a little bit with SAS Nuclear. It used to be SAS Power, but they have a subsidiary now called SAS Nuclear. And I'm working through Calian Nuclear around helping them with nuclear safety culture and performance improvement. They are lit up with the prospect of having a nuclear program in their province. They have always had uranium mining, and they have the technical schools around that and everything else. But they're really the momentum is really growing there. And there was an announcement in Alberta for 4,000 megawatts, I think it was.
1,000, yeah.
Yeah, in Alberta. So all across Canada, the interest in nuclear is growing. And you know, new countries like Poland, for example, are very much interested in having a nuclear program in their country.
You have issues on capacity. I mean, training. Do we have sufficient manpower to deal with this influx of clean energy happening?
No, every conference we're at, there's a workforce development aspect. And I know Canadian Nuclear Association had small workshops in New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, I think Alberta, and Ontario. And they're looking really closely at how do we attract more people into the space. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier around demystifying nuclear. If we can get to the community level, I think we have, pretty good understanding of nuclear, maybe at the organizational level, but at the community level where the youth are there, we want to attract youth to these jobs because, we're probably, it's those young people that are going into high school that you want to attract so that they're interested in university and moving on into the nuclear space.
And the technology is changing. It's not the old turn the knob. I mean, everything
No,
now
yeah,
is
it's all
push
digital.
button, state of the
Yeah.
art, but it's still understanding the process and having that engineering background. But I think there's an opportunity there to bring it down because the technology is so much more advanced to where it
Yes.
was, right? So that's what the exciting part, I think, about nuclear. But it's still a challenge. I mean, we're looking at manpower and everywhere's trying to get manpower is a challenge.
Well, that whole idea of artificial intelligence and pushing buttons kind of frightens me in a way. Claire, we really enjoyed having you here. I mean, it's just an amazing conversation, something that we can carry on forever, really. I mean, because that's the future, right, bro?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Claire, for joining us because it's really important. Energy is what we need.
Absolutely.
Thank you out there for listening. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Mawio'mi Gathering Place of our second segment here, bro. And I'm excited for this segment. We have with us a really good friend, and we consider him a really good friend now. And
all the way from Vancouver.
All the way from Vancouver, a friend of First Nations, Marco Romero. Marco, thank you so much for joining us on our show.
Quay, really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, Marco, we've been very excited about your project, but more importantly, one of the things I like about how you've approached the relationship. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on relationship, particularly with not only with the community but with First Nations as well?
Well, my life has crisscrossed a number of Indigenous communities in several countries where I've worked, and I came to greatly appreciate that history, that connection to the land. So when I came here, you're the first people I wanted to talk to. I think it's the right and respectful approach, and I can only say Wilalin or Wilalio for the welcome, the reception. And we think it's the right thing to do, but it's also good for business that we have local partners in what we do.
I think from our perspective, and I know my brother here is a very let's get out there and let's spread the word that things are going on in the region. And it was for about 18 months we've been dealing with Positive Plus and yourself, Marco, and we didn't want to get and we understand it because you got to manage expectations, right? You don't want people to get too far ahead of themselves to say, okay, because there's still a possibility, even though we're working on this project, which I'm sure everybody out there in TV land has heard in our local region with the battery production out here. But maybe you can give a little bit of what the vision is, Marco, of what Positive Plus sees happening here at the Port of Bellevue.
Well, for starters, we spent a long time trying to find a solution to a problem. The problem is that right now, if you want to make a battery in North America, you don't have the components, the battery materials to put in that battery. Those are made mostly in Asia, mostly in China. And there's a strong desire to be able to purchase locally, and importantly, also to be able to access raw materials that are produced in North America. Right now, if, say, a nickel producer wants to see their nickel in the battery, they have to send that nickel overseas for processing and then bring it back to be able to use in a locally made battery in Canada or the US. So we saw an opportunity, and we searched and searched for a place where we could produce these products cost effectively, where we had all the right conditions to do it, where we could fit into a community and be embraced, welcomed, supported. And we looked at 37 sites all over the eastern seaboard of Canada, the US, and even down to Mexico. And in that process, we stumbled on the Port of Belledune, where you have a wonderful international year-round seaport that's underutilized. And you have land, and you have rail, and you have water, and you have all the conditions to allow this business to happen. So we fell in love with the place. And then when we started meeting people here, realized that they, what we were trying to do fit with what they wanted to do as well. It all made sense. So we began the process of studying, of trying to find a way to design this project, get the right technology brought to here. And it's taken a while to get to where we are today. But one of the big milestones we had earlier this year is we teamed up with a Japanese maker of these products, a company called Kansai Catalyst. And now all of a sudden we have the means to produce these products, at least the technology to produce these products. And we're setting out now to plan and design this project, and hopefully to have the customers buy the products and launch a new business in the area. That's what we're trying to do.
And talking about the product, I mean, it's produced for, I guess, the positive side of EV batteries.
Yeah.
The chemical composition of this particular PCAM, I guess, is something that's produced in China to the extent of 93% of the market.
That's right.
They've got strategically, that's frightening. If all of a sudden they decide we're not producing any more of this material for EV batteries, it puts us at a disadvantage. But on the other hand, it's a great opportunity for the project.
Yeah, look, we're business people. We see a business opportunity here. We want to build a successful business that will be around for a long time. Yes, there is a very much of a concentration of production of these products in Asia and China mainly, but there's other countries as well: South Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Finland, Morocco. And the good thing, though, is that we think we can be competitive here. We think we can hold our ground against foreign competition, especially when the battery plants that are being built in North America absolutely need these products. And they would, if they could, much rather buy locally, especially if the whole supply chain is local. The raw materials, the processing, the making of this PCAM, as we call it, is local, then that's peace of mind.
So the access to raw materials definitely gives you a cost advantage then.
Absolutely. Without the raw materials, there's no PCAM. And right now we are producing the raw materials in North America for these products, but we're not actually going the next stage of processing and blending these together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, because economically, when you think about it, and we have this discussion all the time. If you look at wood chips as an example, we export wood chips and they come back as particle board. Well, why aren't we doing the particle board right here in Canada?
Good point.
So this is an example of that, where PCAM,
absolutely.
we're taking the raw materials, exporting it, and then it's coming back, before it's put into a battery. So it makes actually economic sense, and it's about doing what we have to do to change our way of thinking nowadays, especially with our neighbor down south. Ideally this will all stabilize eventually, and they'll become more neighborly, and we'll be neighbors again. But will that relationship ever be the same is the question, right?
It is.
And that's the challenge we're going to have. Are we ever going to have that great relationship we always had? Maybe not. It'll be a little more strained, but we still have to trade with each other. And I think there's still going to be a need. And as Marco stated, with PCAM, there's a necessity. And, the EV batteries, I mean, we know that Mr. Elon down there is big in Tesla. So, I mean, he needs these things. So it's a great opportunity. When you look at the employment side of it, Marco, people have asked me, and I've had people ask it, is it a specialized necessity trade that's needed to actually produce PCAM?
Well, there's a lot of specialization. This is real green tech, clean tech, high tech manufacturing to make these products. You get these raw materials, you co-crystallize them, make these little crystals, and there's a lot of science. There's a lot of precision in how it's made. Yet a lot of the operators, today don't have to be PhDs or anything like that. There's the sciences behind it. The rest is about operating. And one of the things that attracted us to this area is a long tradition of industry here. There's the mines, the smelter, the pulp mills, and there's a pool of labor in this region that is highly trainable. And that's what we hope to tap into and create these local jobs. We hope people will come to us, want to be trained, want to be, made able to get these jobs. And one of the very important things that we negotiated with Kansai, the Japanese pecan maker that we're working with, is a training program. There's a whole training package as part of our agreement where we would take a number of local people here and have them trained in Japan, shadow other people working, learn the jobs, the different positions, and then they would come back and train the rest of the workforce. We hope to be able to ally ourselves with a college, a university, maybe both, so that we can continue training a new generation and eventually have a very good workforce. Because right now, nobody in North America is making these products, so we're going to have to teach people how to do it.
Marco, you've been very transparent and inclusive with respect to a lot of the meetings you've had. We've met with you with the Japanese, we've met with you with the Chinese. Now you've got a planned trip to Japan. A brother here is going with you, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're trying to actually hit a number of birds with the same stone here. One of the things that we've wanted to do is to show people a pecan plant so they can see what these plants look like and bring back that, hey, I saw one of these. Hopefully everybody will come back and say, it looks great. It looks clean and tidy and modern, and it's not dirty industry and all that. That's one of the objectives. So that's that. The other one is that by having a pecan plant here, we're hoping to be able to attract other participants in the supply chain, because there's a number of different components that ultimately go into a battery. And we're pitching some companies in Japan to come and co-locate with us. Whether they co-locate in Belledune or in St. John, we don't care. The idea is send a message that this is an industry that is welcome. This is modern industry, clean industry that is welcome here. So we're hoping to be able to do that. And for us as a business, it would be synergistic. It could allow us to make our business even better to have some of these other components here. So that's the second objective. Third objective is we're going to be meeting with some of the customers down there. We're going to visit a lithium-ion battery plant, a state-of-the-art, brand new plant that just got commissioned, so people can see where these products are destined. They can see the actual batteries being made, and at the same time, create links, allow people to network and have a connection to New Brunswick, in the hope that, again, that'll attract even more. So we're trying to get this to snowball. But a lot of it is about making our project stronger. Yeah.
And I think, the province of New Brunswick's been very supportive. That's been a great thing, having them work with us, working with yourself. I mean, we've seen a big change with a lot of the work we're doing with the different projects. And that working together is so important, because that's what's going to make these projects come to fruition. Is by us working with the province, working with
Absolutely.
the ministers we have in place, and keeping them informed. ONB is part of the trip as well, so that's exciting. ONB will be over there as well, and I think there's that need, to work together now, and I think people are getting that. In when we look across this country right now,
team concept.
Oh, it's got to be a team concept. I mean, there's no I in team, and that's what's working right now. And the province is really pushing that, and I think that's really important. It's nice to see, the premier's taking that step on critical minerals and mining in the province.
Absolutely.
We have a minister very engaged in energy, so we're very fortunate to have these people that are forward thinking now, and they're saying, like we talked about earlier, looking at NB Power and saying we can't go down that road anymore, kicking the can.
Yeah.
you need that forward thinking in there, because the past didn't work. How do we change it? And we've got to make sure as we move
time
forward.
for change.
Time for change. And we're moving forward in a way that's necessary for the province. And these kind of projects are very exciting. So Marco, I think, in some of the initial, I think in the initial, some of the initial releases, I know we want to keep it still that we're not there yet, but we're close. But when we're looking at the employment side, we had said, 220 employees?
Yeah, the number we're using now is 212. That's a preliminary number for the first phase of the project. If we can get that one going, then we got a better chance of getting the second phase, which would bring the employment up to about 700 people. But I really want to emphasize one thing. This is still early stage. Yes. A lot of things need to be in place. They need to come together for this project to go ahead. There's no assurance that this project will go. Sometime, perhaps by the end of next year, middle to late next year, we should know whether the project is a go or a no-go, which is a real possibility. You can't guarantee, but I can guarantee we're trying very hard.
Keep that thought, Marco. I'm a little more optimistic on the project, I think, than you are. I think it's my marketing hat and so on, and I know you're very conservative. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Marco.
Welcome back to our present segment that we're in. So, bro, I guess you recently did a trip, didn't you?
Well, yeah. Well, Marco was talking about the hub concept and supply chain. We went to Bécancour, Quebec. And part of the inclusion with Marco, I mean, he wanted us to have us and Eel River Bar First Nation have a look at what's happening there. Very exciting. I mean, look at the linkage there. You had a PCAM, a CAM, and all of the supply chain associated with that. I mean, you had about, I don't know how many buildings and factories that were there, but it was astronomical, really. I was impressed.
1,700 people on the construction site.
Just on the construction
Just
alone.
on the construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a big site. In Quebec is a front runner right now in terms of bringing this technology and making these products in Canada. We're hoping to follow behind that soon. And what they did there is impressive. This is General Motors, who teamed up with a Korean company to make PCAM, to make CAM the next step in the process. Right now, we're just starting with the PCAM. And hoping that we could attract somebody else there to bring some of the other components as well.
So, Marco, that plant adjacent to the PCAM is a CAM plant that they were building there?
Yeah,
it wasn't a battery plant?
No, it's no batteries.
Wow. I mean, the amount of construction and the scale of it.
Yeah.
Here we come, Beldoon. Come on now. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, hey, one step at a time. Right now, we have a lot of work to do.
Listen, bro's going with you. I know he's going to be marketing like crazy. He'll do well.
Yeah. I'm starting to practice my Japanese. But listen, Marco, something we always like to talk about is what you've done out in your past in BC, right? You had some projects out there. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on, I know there was a quarry one that was interesting.
Yeah, we, with a team, some of which are now working with us on this team, we built the largest quarry in Canada. It's a project I'm immensely proud of. We've won just about every imaginable environmental, corporate social responsibility, sustainability award, even like global awards for this project. And what really was great, and this is what I tried to bring here, is that was a partnership with 2 local First Nations. We started working on the project 25 years ago. We brought it on stream 18 years ago, and it's been operating ever since. It's the largest quarry in Canada today. It's about to expand should become the largest quarry in North America. And out of that experience, we learned a lot. The local First Nations at first were a bit apprehensive. Who are you? Is this for real? And then when it happened, when they were part of all the planning of it, just the same way we're trying to do right now, they had a sense of ownership, and they actually helped make us better. Their expectations, their requirements were high. They wanted us to have the highest environmental standards. We gave it to them. And today that I love going back up there. I have friends for life. I go there regularly. And now I watch some of the kids that we hired when they were in high school that have been working there now for 18 years. They now have families of their own. I heard recently of one of them having grandkids now. Oh, wow. And he was just a young guy we hired. He actually worked in some of the studies 20 years ago. And now he's a long-standing employee with tenure there. He's had a steady job for all that time. That's very gratifying. That's one of the most beautiful aspects. Out of nothing, out of an idea, you all of a sudden create life, and families have, sustained, can be sustained. Yeah.
For generations and generations. It just keeps going now, right? So it's good. But, from our perspective, with us at the Romero partnering with Marco on this project as two of the proponents, it's so important because for us, we're not myopic. We say that all the time.
Absolutely.
It's not only about Pabineau and Romero, it's about Campbellton, it's about Dalhousie, it's about all the small, it's about the North Incomplete, because this is going to bring opportunity to everybody. These kind of projects, we don't have 200 people to employ at the plant. So this is going to bring, people in, keep our community sustainable. Yeah. They're going to bring in good paying jobs, because they are good paying jobs. And they're going to bring in those jobs, and they're going to spend their money in the region. Absolutely. It's going to create wealth in the region, and it's going to keep our people in the region. And like Marco stated, that's what we want. Is we want this community-based. It's great for our First Nations. Yeah. But I always say, if First Nations prosper, the province prospers. If the province prospers, we prosper.
Absolutely. So, and Marco, we did our due diligence on you as well. Yesterday's home runs don't win today's ball games. But on the other hand, it's important to understand what people think about you. And when we talked about a couple of people there in Alert Bay who dealt with you, nothing but favorable comments. And I know that Bar and us, we both feel the same. And the other thing that you're really focused on, and I think is very important, is social acceptance. You're here. When you're here, you're nonstop. You're reaching out to communities.
Chamber of Commerce, engaging the local population, not just the First Nations. We're having First Nation engagement, but also other community, the communities that are out there that are going to be involved in this project. Yeah. Opportunities that are going to come from it. So that's great to see that kind of involvement.
You've got a couple of meetings coming up with communities this week or next week.
Yeah, this week, next week, our schedule is jammed. What we decided to do at first is to keep a low profile. We really wanted to be confident that we had a decent shot at making this project work, and it's looking better. It's not done, but it's looking better every day, I must admit. And we decided we wanted to have relationships with the community. We wanted to reach out to small groups, individuals. We've gone to all the councils, or most of the councils in the area, keeping them up to date. Now they're going to chambers of commerce, different clubs, Rotary. We're trying to get to everybody. Eventually, we want to get into the schools. We've got an idea right now for a science contest about batteries and energy, and reach out to as many kids as we can so they can learn about what this product is and what it does and how it fits into this energy ecosystem that's changing rapidly. And my hope is that, if people can get to understand what we're trying to do, they should like us. Who couldn't like a project like this? Absolutely. If we're successful, if it works.
And another thing I always weigh people and I gauge how they're doing is how much skin they have in the game.
Absolutely.
We always talk about that, right?
Good point.
And Marco, in your respect, you've just been spending a lot of your own money on this project, and that's huge, and you haven't gone to the province and asked for any money. No. You haven't. This is a total investment of an entrepreneur, and that goes a long way because that shows that you're bought into that project.
That's a good segue into this question, bro. What do you want from the province, Marco?
We want just to be understood, make sure they have a realistic view of what we're trying to do, and as the various processes need to come into place, that they're there for us. We need to get power. We need, from NB Power, we need to get agreements to land ships and everything at the Port of Belledune. And we've got all these conversations evolving, and in time with all these pieces coming together, then I think we've got a pretty decent shot at a project that
So you're not really after financial support from the province, more in the area of administrative support, like permitting, all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, we haven't asked for anything, and there's no planned ask or anything right now in terms of that. Obviously, we want a stable, level playing field. You know, that is important, but nothing extraordinary. That's what we want: a good environment where we're appreciated, and you know, if something needs to happen, it happens.
Tell us a little bit about Marco Romero. I mean, you travel a lot. Your family's there. You're not. What happens when you go home after about 5 weeks being away?
I try to chill a lot. I have a big family. I have 5 children. Beautiful wife, very, very understanding, but you know, used to this lifestyle, because I've worked in a lot of projects all over the world, and I'm away a lot. Like this time, I'm away for almost 2 weeks, so I do simple things. I go hiking, I go fishing.
When you're home?
When I'm home.
Yeah.
When I'm home, and then we try. You know, we're lucky. We can travel and take the family to different places. In fact, this summer I'm bringing my family out here. My 2 youngest kids, my wife and I, are coming for a tour of the Maritimes. We're going to start in Nova Scotia, go to PEI for a bit, and end our trip here in Northern New Brunswick.
Nice.
I want them to see where we are. I want them where Dad is working.
Well, thank you very much for joining us in this edition of Mawio'mi. We hope to see you again next edition. Take care.